Tonight's topic is how to do Teshuva, how to repent. The importance of the topic, the relevance of it, is obviously because we're standing before the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays, the Day of Judgment. But it's also very important because we are holding at the threshold of Mashiach, B'acharit hayamim, at the end of days. So Teshuva has double importance, because if these are the last days before Mashiach comes, B'ezrat Hashem, it means that we have to prepare ourselves. After that, there will be no more chances. As a result of that, our tradition tells us that there's going to be an intensification of signs, of itutim min hashamayim, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu will hopefully stimulate us, motivate us to begin to think, to begin to reflect, and hopefully make the necessary changes in order to properly receive the Mashiach. So what I want to discuss tonight is how to do Teshuvah. But before we know what to do, we need to understand what Teshuvah is all about. And as an aside, I will also mention a little bit about the various reasons or factors of why not everybody does Teshuvah. So perhaps if we can identify one of those factors in ourselves, it will help us deal with it properly. So what does Teshuvah mean? Teshuvah, simply stated, means to return, lashuv, to return to Hashem, to be willing to make changes, and to begin to focus on doing what is right and what is tov. And as I've said in the past, what is tov is the ultimate tov, the ultimate tov hatachliti. In other words, to comply with Hashem's instructions, to do what is necessary to fulfill our purpose and mission in life. If we do so, we are actually involving ourselves in doing that which is tov, that which is good. The question is, why should I want to do it? Why should I have any interest in doing teshuvah, in changing my course of life, in changing my habits? What do I gain? We're not going to discuss sachar va'onesh, reward and punishment. That's a whole different topic. What we need to understand right now is what is the benefit, the immediate benefit of doing teshuvah. What's the importance of it, other than our personal gain? Right? So we're not talking about personal gain here. We're talking about ultimately what is the idea of doing teshuvah. If the human being were to pay attention, close attention to himself, look around, and see the difference between him and the animal kingdom, he will notice, hopefully, that he's very different. Not only because he walks on 2 feet, but there's something else to him that animals don't have. Nothing else in the creation has what we have. What is that? The free will. And what free will represents is responsibilities, accountability. But it's not just that. It also reminds us that we have, because of the power of free will, we have the power, the additional power of progressing, advancing, improving. After all, look around what human beings do in this physical world. They build, they also destroy. They can better, they can cure, they can help. This is something which the animals cannot do. The rest of creation, the Kabbalah says, omedet. Omedet means it's standing. An animal is an animal, it will always remain so. There are no changes other than the physical growth of the animal that one can perceive. An animal is born with a very limited mission. It finishes its mission, whether it's 10 years or 20 years, depending on the type of animal. Some live longer, and it's gone. It does not have really any opportunity or even the ability to make changes in itself, to progress, to better this world. It obviously has an important mission in this world, in this life. God created everything for a purpose and by design. But the human being is different. He's the crown of creation. The world is created for him. And because of the neshama, because of the soul, he has the free will, which allows him not only to make changes, but also to be an active partner in this world, an active. And according to the Kabbalah, in the Zohar, what we do down here below affects even the upper worlds. That is how much of an influence the human being has. The reason why he affects the upper worlds, the spiritual worlds, is because part of him is spiritual. That's the neshama. Because we have both, we have the physical and something that is spiritual about us, we can affect that which is physical and that which is spiritual. So our behavior in this world is extremely important, because what it does, it actually not only manages what goes on in this world to an extent, to a limited extent, but it also can bring about major consequences. Some of them that we can perceive, war, destruction, and some of them that we don't really perceive, the damage that is done by one's actions. But there is also damage or something positive that is accomplished by one's acts, by one's deeds in this world, in the spiritual realm. So the human being needs to be aware that life is not only about physical work, it's also about doing something about his neshama. His neshama, in other words, that entity that is in him, that is called the soul, that is spiritual, that needs to develop too, that needs to progress, that needs to accomplish, that has its own unique mission as well. Besides the human being being unique, Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, as I've mentioned many times, have their own separate mission to accomplish. Every human being in this world is important. We all contribute in some meaningful way. But Am Yisrael, the Jewish nation, has a unique purpose, a different kind of mission. Early on in the series, when we talked about creation, I mentioned that if you look around, if you pay attention to all the details as much as we can with our limited mind, what is noticeable is that God created this world with a tachlit, with a purpose in mind. He didn't just throw some ingredients together and created a world, but it's all designed for a purpose. In the same way, when we build a building, we want it for office space, or we want it for people to live in. We design it not just for play, for fun, but it's for a purpose, for a tachlit. Well, once something has a design for a purpose, it's important. And hopefully the one who built it wants it to continue to run, to continue to be there, to continue to serve its purpose. And hopefully there is a manual of instructions on what is expected of us, what needs to be done with this project, with this building, with the car, anything that you buy today, especially if there is a lot of computers running it, has to have a manual of instructions on how to run it and how to use it. In the same way, this world, when Hashem created the world, He provided us with a manual of instructions, and that is the Torah. The Torah contains the map that we need to follow. It is a blueprint of life. Even though Am Yisrael is the one that's responsible for fulfilling what the Torah says and using that as a guide, we are supposed to be also Or Lagoim, a light unto the nations. In other words, through our conduct, through our teaching and instruction, the non-Jewish world will also be made aware of their responsibilities. This is on top of what I've explained many times before, that the neshama itself is so special, it is divine, that it actually has embedded in it, in its subconscious mind, the know-how of the basics. The basics means not to steal, not to kill. It is in the neshama. So even without the Torah, as the rabbis tell us in the Gemara, even without Torah, we would know certain things, and that which we would not know, we would even learn from animals, like loyalty amongst the pigeons, modesty from the cat, right? Certain things we would be able to learn, diligence from ants. There are certain things that we would be able to pick up elsewhere. But Baruch Hashem, we have the map, we have the Torah, and that is supposed to guide us. Now, in the same way that a machine can break down, a human being can break down too. A machine, if it's misused or if it's overused, can break down. But what happens to a machine that breaks down? It could be repaired, hopefully. A human being can also repair himself if he has broken down. Broken down means that he has strayed, he has moved away from what he's supposed to do, he can bring himself back to where he's supposed to be. He can fix himself. That is Teshuva. Teshuva means getting back on the right road, fixing yourself, returning to Hashem, doing what you're supposed to do. That is basically what Teshuva is called. The opposite of Teshuva is Het. Het means to become distant, to become far. And some people are very, very, very far from doing what they should be doing. So the essence of Teshuva, the essence is really the willingness. The willingness, before you know how to, the essence of Teshuva is the willingness to correct oneself, to want to get closer to the Almighty, and to be willing to assume responsibilities. That is a very, very important point, assuming responsibilities, because if one does not want to assume responsibilities, obviously he's not even going to think of Teshuvah. It is all that. It is the willingness to correct, to get closer to Hashem, to be willing to involve himself in doing what is right. And that, of course, involves acknowledging what was done was wrong, what needs to be corrected. And in order for all that to happen, one needs to be willing to assume responsibility. Otherwise, why should he work? Why should he make any changes? Because he realizes this is serious. This is important. In other words, his actions can make a difference. If one does not realize that his actions can make a difference, if he's not serious, then obviously he's not even going to entertain this idea of doing Teshuvah. So we've said that the Torah is a map. The mitzvot are the road signs. You're going on the road. You want to know where you're going. You want to get to your final destination. So you have to pay attention to the signs. If one does not pay attention to the signs, then he's not going to make it to his final destination. And it would be a shame for people to be driving for many, many years in their life. They're driving. People are driving. And to only realize after 70, 80 years that they've driven in the wrong direction. What a shame. What a waste of a life. Yes, they may have had a comfortable home. They may have owned 3 cars. They may have gone on vacations. But they haven't accomplished what they're supposed to accomplish. The human being, we said before, is a partner in creation. He's a partner. That means he's valuable. He's precious. There's something for him to do. And if he did not do that, well, what a waste. If one does not do what he's supposed to do, then there's really not that much difference between him and an animal. The animal lives too. Animal walks, animal sleeps. What is the big difference between the human being and the animal is his ability to use his mind, his free will, to carry out that which is expected of him. And every one of us, every human being in the world, has a different mission. Different things are expected of each one of us. The common denominator, obviously what we all have in common, is to do the will of God, to do the will of Hashem. And that, of course, requires some knowledge. But if one is not going to look at the manual of instructions, if one is not going to pay attention to what is expected of him, then obviously he will not be headed in the right direction. So now that we've explained more or less what Teshuvah is, and I say more or less because in order to properly understand the subject, it requires a lot more than just one lecture. But the essence of Teshuvah is to return to fixed, to the willingness to come back and do the right thing. Now that we understand the essence of Teshuvah, we have to go to the next step. How do we do Teshuvah? How do we do Teshuvah? So I've used many times the example of one going on the freeway and being stopped by a policeman for speeding. And of course we're first upset, and we may even argue with the highway patrol that we were not speeding, yes speeding. But after we agree to the ticket or whatever, the policeman begins to chat with us. So where are you going this morning? Well, I'm going to San Francisco. Well, you're not going to make it to San Francisco because you're going on the 5 South instead of the 5 North. You're headed in the opposite. You're going to be in Tijuana before you know it. So, even though this was a ticket, an expensive ticket, But this was a benefit. This was something that was beneficial for the driver. Had he continued, had he not been stopped, he would not have realized his mistake. All right, so what do you do when you realize that you're on the wrong freeway, the wrong direction? Well, if you're in Southern California, you're lucky because there are off-ramps, and you can easily get off and get right back and go in the right direction. If you're in New York State and you made the wrong turn, you can be stuck for 25 miles before you're able to come off. It has happened to me. But you don't despair, because you always know that at some point you can get off and return. But it may take you a while. So that's the right thing to do. That's the normal thing to do. That's so logical. But we're gonna try to figure out why some people just don't get off, even though they know they're in the wrong direction. But in the meantime, we need to understand that Teshuva, the first step of doing Teshuva, is getting off. Admitting your mistake, realizing that you're in the wrong direction, and getting off. The purpose of the signs on the freeway, and there are signs, are for what? To let us know in which direction we're going. You know, there's a 10 east and there's a 10 west. They go in opposite directions. Same thing with the 405, north and south. There's the same number. One is an N and one is an S. You can easily miss it. And sometimes it's confusing. But what the signs are there for, the purpose of the signs, is to really guide us in the right direction. Though, how does it happen then that people do not look at the signs? And I'm not going to talk about the ones who are illiterate. I don't think they should be driving. A person who's illiterate does not read the signs. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be driving, you better know how to read the signs. You can't be blind. You have to see. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about people who can see, people who can read. Then why should they make a mistake? Can anybody suggest here, why would somebody make a mistake of going on the north instead of the south, or the south instead of the north? The signs are in front of him. Anybody want to suggest? He's daydreaming, and therefore he's not looking at the signs.
Yeah, it's like kind of zoned out.
How about his text messaging? Right? Talking on the cell phone? No, let's not be that extreme. Right? It's English, there's a simple word for it. He's distracted. The word is called distracted, hesech da'at. There's something shemesiach da'ato, there's something that is distracting him. It could be all sorts of things. How about somebody who is not talking on the phone, not text messaging, not daydreaming, like you said, but enjoying the scenery? After all, there are some roads that are called scenic roads, right? He's enjoying the scenery. Same thing, same result, right? He will become distracted. Then you have somebody else. You have somebody that is basically following the next car. He's going somewhere, I'll be going wherever he's going. You know what that reminds me? One of the greatest excuses for speeding that the police hear, you know what it is? I was speeding, I was just going with the flow. Are you willing to go with the flow even though they're going to go over the gully, in other words, over the edge of the cliff? Are you willing to go with the flow even if they go over and crash, chas v'shalom? Going with the flow. What kind of an explanation is going with the flow? But that's another explanation of why people are not paying attention. Now, obviously, my example involves the freeway, and hopefully most people know where they're driving. Hopefully. I mean, could you imagine somebody getting on a bus and not knowing where to go? Just getting on a bus? I mean, most people hopefully know where they want to go when they're driving. But why shouldn't people also know where they're headed when they live a life? If you ask somebody from the street, why are you alive? What is life for? Does life have any meaning to you? Many people, you'll be surprised, have no explanation, no answer to that question. No good answer. But that it should be the same, more or less. People should more or less know what they want to do in life, why they're here, where they're headed. They don't necessarily know. So the simple explanation of why people are being misled or not headed in the right direction is because they are distracted. Then you have those, believe it or not, who are lazy. They realize they made a mistake. They realize, I'll get off later. The later you get off, the more difficult it is. The more mileage to come back. And you may even forget to get off later too. Simply they're lazy. All these people, whether you're distracted or whether you're lazy, they're not going to get to their final destination. In real life, even though it's not an exact freeway, but similar things happen. Most human beings, not all, Baruch Hashem, but most human beings, unfortunately, are distracted mostly. I'm talking about those who know, more or less, what they need to do. Okay? They know the Torah, they know there is mitzvot, they see the signs, they know their direction approximately. Most of these individuals, the reason why they don't head towards the right direction is because they are distracted because of their body. What does that mean? The body requires a lot of attention. It needs to eat, it needs to sleep, rest, go on vacation, right? The body is a very important part of our existence. We need a car to get from place to place. We need money to pay for the bills. So we need to work, physical work. The body takes up a lot of our time and our attention. And it distracts us from what? From the neshama. The neshama is also part of us. It is the captain of the ship, really. It is the most important part of us. It is really the essence of the human being. The neshama, the soul. So many people end up spending a lot of time, money, and effort on their body and their physical body, not paying attention to what the neshama's interests are and what the neshama really needs. A human being who therefore is much more focused on his bodily needs than his neshama will make many, many mistakes. Many mistakes. He will get angry if things don't go right. Because it is his body, it is the physical needs, it is his tahavot, his desires, that is really driving him. And therefore, it is very likely that he will make many mistakes because of that. Were we to pay attention to the neshama would say to us, what's the big deal? Get over it. This is a vanities. This is hevel havalim. This is not important. Don't make a big deal out of it. This is not a priority. Don't work so hard. Life is not only about making money. Who says that? Who's talking? That's the neshama talking. Or we can also call it the Yetzer Tov, the good angel, the positive inclination that we have, which also comes from our neshama. So there's always the struggle, obviously, between the neshama, the needs of the neshama, the needs of the guf. And when we spoke about Shabbat, at one point, I explained how that is the beauty of Shabbat. The day of rest is not only a physical day of rest, which is a great idea, but it's also for us, at least once a week, to be focused on the needs of the neshama. We have to abstain from physical work in order to be able to listen to the neshama. If one continues to work, to engage in physical work, then he cannot listen to the neshama. So one of the ideas behind Shabbat is stop that physical work. 6 days of curse is enough. You want a 7th day that is cursed as well? Why work so much? Is life only about working, about making money? It's not, but people think so. Some people think so. So many people end up making mistakes because they don't listen to the neshama. Comes along Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Hashem gave us these days. Rosh Hashanah, which is the day of judgment, Yom Kippur, which is the day of atonement, to be able, of course, to reflect. It is like the highway patrol that stops us in the middle of the road and makes us get into a conversation with Hashem. Am I headed in the right direction or not? It gives us a chance. Once a year at least, we don't have to wait till Rosh Hashanah, but nevertheless, once a year, stop, think, reflect. Perhaps you need to get off quickly and get on the right direction. So this is obviously all for our benefit, for our good. What happens on Rosh Hashanah? We also have a shofar, the blowing of the shofar, which is also intended to awaken us, to awaken the neshama, to motivate us. Shofar is something very, very deep. One can, of course, continue to elaborate more about the meaning of the shofar. What exactly is the shofar? Why we take this particular horn of a specific animal to use, to blow, and to remind. Obviously, that is a whole different topic. But the basic idea behind shofar is wake up those of you who are asleep. As the Rambam says. Wake up. Wake up those of us who are asleep, and many people are asleep. They really are. I just came back from Mexico, and I find that people are very asleep there. Just very not focused on what's going on in the world. They're, Baruch Hashem, beautiful people. Talking about the Jewish community now. Doing the right things, learning Torah too, but they're just not focused on what's going on. That's really nice. I mean, that person is not focusing on all the terrible things that are happening in the world. But one should pay some attention to that because Mashiach is coming. You have to realize certain things, what they mean. But because of the lifestyle there, they're just not focused. People here are much more into the politics of the country than over there. I don't blame them over there because the country has a lot of corruption in the system. And it's like, so there's so much you can do. How much influence can you have? But nevertheless, people are asleep. And people are asleep all over the world, are not realizing what is happening. So Teshuvah is intended to come about as a result of somebody waking up, finally. Unfortunately, the shofar will not wake up everyone. Why not? Have you ever put your alarm clock for 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, and when it rang, you closed it, and you went back to sleep? Then why did you put it for? Why did you set up your alarm clock? Now, I'm sure if you had to catch a flight, you wouldn't do that to the alarm clock, right? You would probably get up, hopefully. Otherwise, you'd miss your flight. But if it's for prayers, for studies, for things that we can get away with it, that we think we can get away with it, we like to push it off. So what happens in life, now we're switching over to why some people do not do Teshuvah, is they simply go back to sleep. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, they come to the Bet HaKnesset. They're maybe a little excited, maybe not, I'm not sure. But they're not necessarily focusing on what the meaning of the day is, or what is expected of them. You've been invited. You've been called to court. Hire an attorney. Prepare yourself. Teshuvah doesn't just happen on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. It's supposed to happen before. We're supposed to prepare ourselves for that day. How are you going to face the tribunal? I mean, there is a tribunal. We are judged. This is true. This is serious. But people are asleep. People are not willing to put all their attention to this. And when they wake up, because the alarm sounded, they go back to sleep. So the first step in doing Teshuvah is hitbonenut, the actual taking the time off to diagnose our life, to look closely at our life, to examine our life. What have we done? What have we accomplished? What have we not done right? That's called hitbonenut. Hitbonenut means to look closely at yourself, examine yourself. How many people do that? Examine, they take apart. Do you know that the Gaon of Vilna and other great rabbis at the end of the year would take apart their year and figure out how much time they wasted? The Gaon of Vilna once cried, I think it was him, that there were 2.5 hours that he couldn't figure out from the entire year, 2.5 hours, what he did with them. Where did they go? Every other minute of his year was accountable. Either he was learning, either he went to sleep, of course, either he was eating, and I'm sure even when he was asleep or eating, he was learning. I mean, he could explain every minute what he was doing, and he felt bad. He did not know where 2.5 hours during the year went. That's called hitbonenut. You're actually looking into your life, into your use or misuse of the time. So in order to do Teshuvah, in other words, we're talking right now about the steps of doing Teshuvah, you need to mitbonen. In other words, you have to be willing and begin to examine yourself. What am I doing? What am I not doing? Where am I headed? And so forth. It is important to learn Torah. Rabbi tells in Pirkei Avot, Lo amaretz Hasid ben bur yerechet. An ignoramus, a person who's not learned, cannot progress. He can never be truly a God-fearing Jew. In order to be a God-fearing Jew, in order to progress, one has to learn Torah, because the Torah will tell you how to do it, what to do. Without learning Torah, how are you going to know? I want to, yes, but how? Well, for that, one has to learn Torah. A person who wants to do Teshuvah, wants to make a change in his life, he has to learn. He may need to make his kitchen kasher, because it's not kosher now. Because of his lack of knowledge, he made everything taref. How is he going to find out what to do? Of course, he can hire someone initially to make his kitchen kosher. But how is he going to maintain that kitchen kosher? A woman has tremendous responsibility, if she's married, in preserving the family purity. How is she going to do how is she going to know what to do if she doesn't consult with a rabbi, if she did not receive the proper training before she got married? These are complicated areas. How about Shabbat? So many details. One who does not learn Hilchot Shabbat is for sure being Mechalel Shabbat. Is for sure making mistakes in desecrating the Shabbat. There's so many details, it's almost impossible that we will do everything just right if we never learned the halachot. So in order to correct, one needs to learn too, because you need to know how to correct and how to do things right from now on. But most important of all, besides knowledge and knowing what to do and what not to do, what the Torah will actually teach us is the right priorities in life. It is because people do not have the right priorities in life that they make many, many mistakes. People realize this is not a priority, right? They'll have an easier time giving it up. Marriages should be a priority, right? Marriage is something very important. To some people it's not. Because if it was, they would invest in it. They would do everything that is in their ability to improve it, to maintain it, to fix whatever needs to be fixed. Because marriage should be a priority, an investment for the rest of your life. A home that we're building where we want the Shekhinah, the Divine Presence, to reside. It is a family we're creating. It is a whole incredible mission in itself. To marry, to stay married, to build a family, a home, a Jewish home. That requires a tremendous amount of effort, patience, knowledge. But if it's not a priority, then people will dispose of it if things go wrong. And that's why we have so many divorces today, because unfortunately marriage has not become such a priority. People live together. Why get married if I can live for free with somebody? I don't need to commit myself. I can live with someone. Just be friends. This concept of living together with someone else is a lack of willingness to assume responsibilities, to recognize what the sanctity of marriage really is, and the importance of it. It's both ignorance and a lack of willingness to assume responsibilities. So a great deal of mistakes that are being made by many people is because their priorities are all messed up. I mean, tell me, to have the latest car, is that a priority? You have to have the latest car? Some people just have to have the latest car. Even if it means getting into debt and taking away money from Jewish education. Their kids, they would send to public school. Yes, because, it should be free. But their money, they're going to spend on themselves, on a latest car. But what is a car? A car is just a vehicle to transport you from place to place, from point A to point B. That's all it is. Why do you have to have the latest? Why do you have to have the most beautiful, the most expensive one? That's not a priority. But for some people it is. They are mistaken. They don't learn Torah. They don't have the right ashkafa, the right outlook in life. So therefore, the beginning of Teshuvah requires one to focus on the tachlit, on the real meaning of life, what our real mission is. The most important condition, after having examined oneself, obviously after having realized that there's something that we need to do in our lifetime, the first step, the first and perhaps the most important step in doing Teshuvah is to be modeh al ha'emet. It is being truthful. Don't be a liar. If you lie to others, you're going to lie to yourself. You have to be willing to admit your faults and mistakes. That's so difficult for people to do. And for many men, it is very hard to admit their faults and mistakes to their spouses. But if you want shalom bayit, if you want peace, peace of mind and peace at home, you have to be willing to admit that you were wrong. And sometimes, you know what? You should say you were wrong even if you were right. So what? You're going to gain shalom bayit. You're going to gain peace. So say you're wrong. What's the big deal? It's the ego. It's only the ego. And because it's so difficult, a lot of people are so far from just the very first step. Being modeh ala emet. Admit it. Admit to yourself, yes, I made a mistake. I'm on the wrong freeway. I'm going in the wrong direction. That's so difficult for so many people to do. They don't get beyond the first step. Another requirement for a person to advance, to progress, is to like himself. A lot of people have a problem with self-esteem. A lot of people are depressed, unfortunately. Obviously, depression, lack of self-esteem, is going to also hinder progress. Most people in their physical life, at work, if you're an employee, or even if you're the employer, you're working for yourself, you want to advance. You have one store, you want to open up more stores. You want to increase productivity. You want to make more money, right? You want to enlarge your business. Most people, that's the way they think in the physical world. Well, that should be the same thing in the spiritual world. One should want to advance. One should want to become better. But for that, he has to like himself. He has to have the self-esteem. Obviously, if a person is suffering from a lack of self-esteem and he has depression, it's going to be a little bit of a problem. So another important idea is that a person needs to be motivated to improve himself, to advance, to become a better person. And in order to do that, he has to like himself. Another important idea is the constant desire to grow, the ambition to grow. Rabbis tell us a person should always ask himself, Mataya yagiu ma'asai le'maasei avotai Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, when will my deeds come close to the deeds of my forefathers? Look up and look back to your forefathers. They were so much closer to Hashem in many ways. In order for one to aspire to become like them, he actually, first of all, he has to understand what it means to be like them. Why is it being like them so good? Once he, of course, acknowledges that that was the right way to live their life, with self-sacrifice, with so much devotion, with so much clarity about what is the right and what is wrong, if one, of course, acknowledges that he should want to aspire to be like them. Don't you want to be like them? Well, not if you think they were primitive. Some people really think, some Jews, really think that those generations before them were closer to being monkeys, because they believe in evolution, maybe. They think that they are more advanced, more progressed. They know how to use a computer. They drive cars. So those people were more primitive. The real tradition, a real Jew, knows the facts. The reality is that those who came before us were much greater than us. Aspire to be like them. There is a degeneration, a yeridat hadorot in all the generations. We've come down, 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 down. And right before Mashiach comes, the Gemara makes a whole list of the decadence of the time. And one of the examples is how a child, instead of looking up to his dad, will look down at him. A child will look down at his dad, will be disrespectful, will have so much chutzpah. Whoever heard of that years ago? The family unit has broken down. The relationship between the father and son has broken down. Spirituality is at its lowest. And part of that has to do because of the emphasis on materialism instead of spirituality, on the body, and the physical body. So many, many people, including the Jewish nation, has moved away from being focusing on the real tachlit and the ultimate purpose of what we're here for. Part of that has to do, part of the blame is materialism. But there are other factors. There are factors that have always existed, and that is the willingness to admit one's mistakes. That's always has been a problem. always has been a problem. People are not always really prepared to make changes. It's not easy to make changes. So it's important to have that aspiration to become a better person, the willingness, the desire to progress, to improve. Why will someone not want to be a better person? Well, let's try to figure out right now the various ideas, various explanations of why people really are not doing Teshuva, which it requires making the changes, becoming a better person, and so forth. I'm not going to talk about those who think their parents were primitive. Okay, that's just an extreme idea. Unfortunately, it exists. But a normal person that knows the truth, that has examined himself, admits his mistakes, he has some of the basic ingredients. He has even taken some of the steps to doing Teshuvah. Or at least he's thought about it. But he can't get himself to take the next step. In other words, he's not aspiring to take the next step, which means to improve or to make changes. He doesn't have a problem recognizing. May have some difficulty admitting it, but he's stuck. He's stuck that he's not taking the next step, wanting to make the actual change, implementing the change. We talk about it, we bang ourselves in the chest, Hatanu Avinu Pashanu, but not everybody goes beyond that point. What's going on? There's one individual who does not aspire, really aspire deep down to make a change because he's, as we call in Hebrew, a shachtzan. He's an arrogant person. He thinks that he doesn't really have to change. There's nothing wrong with me. Everything wrong with her. If it's a marriage, you will hear this. I'm not to blame. There's nothing wrong with me. Anybody who says there's nothing wrong with him, shachtzan, as we would call it in Hebrew, arrogant. It's not just arrogant. Shachtzan has a different connotation. It's worse than just being arrogant. He's stupid. He's an imbecile. How could a person even say something like that? But some people would actually say that. I don't see any reason to change. I think everything is okay with me. Another individual is going through a mashber. A mashber means that he's going through a difficult time in his life. He's going through depression, confusion. It's not completely his fault. Nevertheless, he cannot focus properly and make that decision. No, I want to get out of this. I want to make a change. I want to do things differently. So it is not completely his fault, but nevertheless, we have to include him because we're trying to figure out why people don't make changes. So there are people who need help. On their own, it would be more difficult for them. Then there's a third individual. Rabbi, me? I have a good heart. Whoever told you that just having a good heart is enough to be Jewish? Judaism requires ma'asim, deeds, actions. Could you imagine an employee coming to work one day and telling his employer, today I'm not really doing anything. I just want to behave myself. I have a good heart. What do you mean? What am I going to do with your good heart? I need you to work the machines. I need you to answer the phones. But I have a good heart. But that's what people say. He's a good Jew. He has a great heart. He's an angel. Yeah, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't put on tefillin every day. He doesn't eat kosher. He's not conducting himself as a Jew. A good heart is not enough to get you anywhere. Judaism demands ma'asim, deeds. That's what it's all about. A good heart is beautiful, but it won't get you anywhere. So some people have that attitude of just being a nice person. I don't cheat anybody. Oh, that's so nice of you. But that's not all. An honest person, a good person, great. So you have some good ingredients. But Judaism requires ma'asim. It requires deeds. A man has certain mitzvot. A woman has certain mitzvot. They have certain instructions you have to follow. You have to comply with. You can't just have and live your life with a good heart. Then you have an individual who really thinks, you know what? Yes, I'm sorry, I feel bad, I've made mistakes, but I'm already over 60, over 70, it's too late. There are people who think that way too. It's never too late. There's a story of an individual who had a discussion with a rabbi. Rabbi was convincing him to make changes in his life, and he felt that he's old, it's too difficult to make his kitchen kosher, to make all these necessary changes. But he says, you know what? If I get a sign from heaven, then I will make the changes. I need a sign from heaven, because I think it's too late. So he went to eat in a kosher restaurant with the rabbi. What kind of a kosher restaurant was it? Chinese food. And you know what the part of the meal was? Special cookies. You know what those cookies are called? Fortune cookies. What's in a fortune cookie? A piece of paper. So he took out one of the bowl, and his message in the fortune cookie was, it's never too late. So he took that as a sign mishamayim that it's never too late. And he, of course, Baruch Hashem, he did complete Teshuva. It's really never too late. Rabbis tell us, Afilo Adam Goses, even if you're on your deathbed, you can do Teshuva. That Teshuva will never be the same had you done it when you're young, when you have the evil inclination, when you have all the struggles and challenges. That time, the reward is greater. But it's not so much the reward. If a person does Teshuva when he's young, you know what it means? His whole upbringing, his kids' upbringing, his whole life will be different. If a person does Teshuva at the very end of his life, even though Hashem accepts it, what a waste. What kind of a life did you have? Your kids are gone. You no longer will have the influence you could have had on them had you done Teshuva as a parent early on, before they were born, or when they were young. But for you to do Teshuva later on, okay, that's very nice. Hashem welcomes you. But it's not exactly a complete Teshuva. Even though Hashem forgives one, he still may have to atone for his sins, depending what sins he committed. But at least Hashem accepts one's remorse if it's sincere. But it would make a big difference had it been earlier on. Never too late. As far as difficulty in doing Teshuvah, nothing is too difficult. People who have the habit of smoking have come out of it. Smoking is a very terrible habit to get rid of. If people can overcome that, they can overcome anything. So Teshuvah is possible. Everybody can do Teshuvah. There's no excuse. Then you have another individual who's having a difficult time doing Teshuvah because he's immersed and engrossed in Tavot, in all the desires and pleasures of the world. Because he's so attached to the pleasures of the world, he has become, as we call it in the Hebrew, mefunak. He's become spoiled. And what does being spoiled do to one? It makes him unsensitive, indifferent to wanting to change and to become a better person. Because he's so attached to all his toys, to all his pleasures, that makes him so unsensitive to the neshama, to what he really needs to do. And you have a lot of people like that. Because they need to have certain things, because they have a certain lifestyle that they don't want to change, they have certain pleasures, certain things that they enjoy, they just won't give it up. People who are alcoholics is another example. Smokers too. I mean, it's a pleasure for them. And it's difficult to give it up. So they're just going to be stuck, not wanting to give up the pleasure. But that's what may be required. You can do Teshuvah and still enjoy life. Don't get me wrong. But you have to be very, very careful that is not the central part of your life. That is not the greatest priority. But for some people, because they have become so accustomed to a certain lifestyle of pleasures, that they become unsensitive, and therefore do not even think or truly desire Teshuvah. They come to the Beit HaKnesset, they will attend the prayers, but will they sincerely say, Hashem, I want to change, please forgive me? No, it's not going to come from the bottom of their heart, because they're not sensitive enough. You think they would ever cry, shed a tear? Hashem, I really feel sorrow. How are they going to get themselves to shed a tear? Only if you're sensitive, if you really are pained by what you did. But if somebody is so materialistic, he's not going to be pained. It's a contradiction. It's not easy for somebody who is immersed in the pleasures of life, therefore, to be sensitive to Teshuvah. Another individual who, of course, will not think about doing Teshuvah or will not take the necessary steps is one who's ignorant, completely ignorant. As we said before, it requires learning Torah. Well, Baruch Hashem, if one has the willingness, then he eventually, hopefully, will want to learn as well, and he will be guided by a rabbi or by a friend as to what he needs to do. But that's a very important point to always keep in mind, that one who does not know, was deprived of a Jewish education, grew up in some country where there's no yeshivot, no Torah, he obviously will not know. Simple, total ignorance, like many communists, Russians. They didn't know. They didn't know better. Nevertheless, Hashem will help them. You first have to want to help yourself. You first have to open up the door. Even a small crack, the rabbis tell us. Open me up a small crack, Hashem says, and I will open up the doors wide open. But you need to open up a crack. In order to open up a crack, you need to think. Which leads us to the next individual, an individual who does not even think. Now, why don't people think? Think. People think about all sorts of things. Some people don't think. Part of the blame, you'll be surprised, part of the blame of why many people do not even think is because of the media. The media in this country and in other countries is occupying the minds of people in such a way, poisoning their minds, to think about the news, about movies, about politics, about rechilut. How do we say rechilut in English? The gossip, right? All sorts of media. You know what goes on. There's comedy, there is entertainment, there is science. Some of that is good, right? But some of it is not too good, not too healthy. But what they all have in common is they occupy our mind. They distract us. And sometimes we find it that some governments are so happy that the populace is occupied with soccer in Latin America. They subsidize the tortilla and the beans. Why? Because let the people be calm. Let the people not think about their troubles. Otherwise they will rebel and cause a revolution. Let's keep them happy and occupied with sports, with entertainment. Could you imagine what would happen in this country, in the United States of America, if there was no television, no radio, no movies, no newspapers? You'll have more anti-Semitism. I guarantee it. Now that's, for some people, that they may consider that an extreme statement. How could you say that? It's very simple. That's what happened in Europe. In the old days, you didn't have all the entertainment. All you needed was a spark. And if the spark came from a bishop who was a Jew hater, he got the entire church or the entire town against the Jews. All of a sudden, all you needed was a spark. Why? You think he had anything better to do? They have nothing better to do. And on top of that, they're ignorant. They believe their bishop. So there's a lot of ignorance. A lot of ignorance. Americans are very ignorant. You ask an American, where's Tahiti? He'll tell you first, what? What's that? He's not going to say, I don't know. He's first going to tell you, what's that? I'm not even talking about a place called Ulaanbaatar, the capital city of Mongolia. And for that, you have to learn geography. Even simple things, right? Simple things Americans don't know. They know more about baseball, they know more about the movie stars, than they know facts, important facts that they should know. Yeah? Ask somebody, have you heard of Israel? Yeah, of course, I've heard of Israel. It's in the radio every day. How could he not hear of Israel? Do you know where Israel is on the map? No. I can't blame them. It's so small that you can't even see it. But they don't know. Yeah. Ask them about what's going on in Iran. Do you know what's going on in Iran? What's going on in Iran? What is going on in Iran? They're not as interested in those things because it doesn't relate to them. It's not part of their country, obviously. But it's more than that. They're so preoccupied with other things, they don't have time to look into what's going on elsewhere. So a lot of people in this world, not just Jews, non-Jews too, are completely distracted, completely oblivious to what's going on. And some of it is intentional. Intentionally make them oblivious. Distract them. So that is why a lot of people are not thinking. Why are some governments not happy with intellectuals? What are intellectuals? Intellectuals are people who think. An intellectual is dangerous to the government. he's going to realize what's wrong with what the government is doing, that it's corrupt. And there are a lot of corrupt governments. And who's going to find that out? Who's going to discover that? Not one who's naive, but one who's intellectual, one who's thinking, a thinker. So a lot of people today are not thinking. And that was the big hidush. That was the big change that occurred in the generation of Avraham Avinu, that one man, one individual, began to think, what are you guys doing? Worshipping stones, idols. This is not it. This is crazy. You're out of your mind. What are you going to gain from it? This is not God. He began to think. Avraham Avinu was a thinker, and he was a thinker from when he was a child. To think, to look around, to examine, to ask questions. And obviously, when you ask questions, you pursue answers. So that's something that is missing from a lot of people. They don't stop to think. However, as I've said before, the most important midah, most important ingredient to do teshuvah, we want to know how to do teshuvah, is midat ha'emet. Now I'll tell you why. Why is emet so important, truthfulness? We spoke about the various requirements that are necessary for a person to progress, to want to improve, to make a change. The reason why emet is number one and the most important one, the willingness to admit one's faults and mistakes, to acknowledge the truth, is because that's the only ingredient, perhaps more than any other one, that will give you the motivation, that will drive you, that will give you the push or initiative that you need to do teshuvah. Emet gives that. Emet allows for an initiative. If one does not have emet, he may say, oh, it's so beautiful, it's so nice, maybe I'll think about it. There's nothing to push him. The only way a person is going to be driven, he's going to have the koach to initiate a change, to make it to the next step, is if he has emet. Emet will tell him, it will compel him. Isn't this the truth? Yes, then why didn't you do something about it? You know what I mean? So once one has completely acknowledged the reality, in other words, what life is, what his responsibilities should be, that already gives him some push. And that push is important to take the next step, which means to implement a change, which is a step that many people do not come to. A person who's amiti, who's truthful, really truthful, can actually tell if what he's about to do is for personal reasons or for the truthful reasons. To do what is right and correct in the eyes of Hashem, or because he's selfish about it. Some people are confused. You know, what I'm about to do, is this right or wrong? How could you tell? Sometimes it's not so easy. It's a gray area. If one has trained himself to always speak the truth, to always be a truthful person, it will be easier for him to discern, to figure out who's motivating him here, the evil inclination or the good inclination. Do I really want to do this because I intend to do somebody a favor, something good, or is it because of selfish reasons? One who's truthful has a big advantage in that it will help him figure out what's motivating him. If one is a liar, he will lie to himself, because the mind is a lawyer. It can justify almost anything. One who is amiti, who's dogel baderech haemet, who always strives to do what is right and correct, is always truthful, admits his faults, his flaws, he has a better chance of being able to do the right thing, of seeing with more clarity. What has happened in our generation, and why a lot of people are not doing what is right and what is truthful, is number one, as we said before, the priorities are all mixed up. What happens when the priorities are mixed up is that people become excited from the wrong things. You know what that does to someone? When a person is excited and he's happy with the wrong things, there's no room for him to be excited about other things. You know, when you love someone, you know, it is hard to love somebody just as much, somebody else, as you love the other person. Your love and your focus are so much in this one individual that it's hard to share it with others. Sometimes there's no room to share love with, or the intensity of that love with more than one person. When Hashem tells us, "Ve'aftat Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha," love Him with all your heart, with all your soul, it's difficult because you have to share that love with your kids, with your family members too. That takes away a little bit, or it attempts to take away a little bit of the love that you have to give Hashem. It is still possible to love Hashem with all your heart, because what that really, really means is that you focus on doing His will even when you're having a hard time. Not only when you're comfortable and wealthy, but b'chol levavecha, even if you're in a bad mood, even if you're struggling, you can still love Hashem. That's what it really means, b'chol levavecha. At all times and under any circumstances, in any situation. But the other part of it, to split your love, that's very difficult. Therefore, when people are excited about the wrong things, how could they show excitement for other things? That excitement is drawing them away from being excited about these things. Be excited about your marriage. Be excited about your kids. If you're going to be excited about your toys, about your cars, that's going to take away from having that excitement towards other things. People who are excited about material things, how could they show that kind of excitement, or even close to that kind of an excitement for that which is spiritual? They've exerted all their energy on other things. The only perhaps way one can come out of that is by looking a little bit at some very incredible experiences that other people have, looking at their experiences and seeing how they have become so excited about something completely opposite. The best example of those individuals who have this beautiful experience is a convert. A convert who was a non-Jew yesterday, who's become a ger tzedek, a true convert, who wants to carry upon himself responsibilities and the yoke of mitzvot, is so excited. He's so excited. Have you ever seen the excitement of a child, 6-year-old, 8-year-old child, coming to greet his dad, who he has not seen for 3 months? You know how beautiful it is? See, Abba, have not seen, he's been away for a few weeks or months. The excitement of a child is so beautiful. Does the adult have the same excitement to see his dad? Not so much. A child has that kind of an excitement. Rabbis tell us a ger is like a little child. He meets up with Judaism for the first time. He's so excited. We have to learn from that excitement that this is what we should have. He never had it before. He wasn't born with it. And look how excited he is. He's like a little child. A beautiful, sincere excitement. We've gotten used to things. We've moved away. We've gotten excited about other things. And all of that is drawing away from our excitement that we should have to get closer to Hashem, to want to do Teshuva. We don't have it. Look at the ger. There's a beautiful story with Rav Moshe Leib Sasov, 200 years ago approximately, who used to be away from his home for a number of months, collecting funds and trying to redeem Jews from jail, from the dungeon. Great man, big tzaddik, always helping people. And one day he came home after a long trip, and his kids ran up to him, Abba, what did you bring us now? They were excited to see him, but they also asked him, what did you bring us? Did you bring, a father comes home after a while, he brings a gift. What did you bring us? So the wife noticed that her husband was all of a sudden pale, was in shock. And she asked him, what's wrong? Why are you so in shock? What's wrong with the question? So he says, you don't understand my shock. It's not so much the question. The moment my kids asked me, what did I bring? It reminded me, when we come upstairs after 120 years, they're going to ask us, what did you bring us? And I feel embarrassed. What am I going to bring? What do I have to show? When we come to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to meet up with Hashem, we may be embarrassed because perhaps we don't have anything to show. What did we accomplish this year? It's a terrible feeling. That's why it's so important, obviously, before we come to these days, to examine ourselves, to excite ourselves that we're headed towards a very important meeting. But obviously, if we have nothing to show, we may be embarrassed. But at least, Hashem says, don't worry. Even if you didn't bring me anything, you still have a chance. One of my favorite examples of how one can make a small difference at the last possible moment in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, is when you were away for a long time and you're coming home. You love your wife. You want to bring her a gift. You just didn't get around to it. You know what you can still do? You can still buy her something at the duty-free shop. Duty-free. Right before you board the plane, there's duty-free. You can still pick up something. So yes, even though you were busy and you didn't have a chance to pick something up, you can always pick it up at the last moment. As long as you really care for her, as long as you're excited about her, as long as it's important for you to make her happy. Those are the feelings that we need to have before we approach these days. Okay, now that we've understood more or less what is Teshuva, what is required, why people are not doing Teshuva, we just need to understand a couple more ideas. And one of them is vidui, confession. All we've spoken about till now really was the concept of what should be going on in our mind, in our machshava. But in order to actually implement, you need to carry it out further. The next step after the thoughts and after the admission of guilt or whatever is vidui, confession. Confession is to verbalize, which takes the thoughts to a higher step. What the confession does, it actually breaks our heart even more. Just thinking about it is not enough. You actually have to verbalize it. After you verbalize it, which has given this even much more strength, your thoughts, you will hopefully now have the strength to carry on next step, and that's the maaseh, the actual deed. And that, of course, will be through understanding. You still have to understand, what did I do wrong, or what have I not done right? In other words, the next step after confessing will be to try to figure out, to try to learn what it is that I need to change. Just a couple tips. A lot of people, Baruch Hashem, will undertake to do Teshuvah at some stage, either thought, or even the next step, verbalize it, or even more, to actually want to implement it. I want to give you one of the most important tips for anybody who's doing Teshuvah, and we all need to do Teshuvah. Tafasta merubelo tafasta. Don't take too much upon yourself. Take one thing at a time. Shwaya shwaya, as we say in Arabic. Little at a time. It's called, in English, progressive incremental changes. Incremental changes. Little by little. If you take too much, that's atzata yetzerah, to tire you. And it will not happen. Tafasta merubeh, if you take too much upon yourself, you will not take anything. Take one thing. Start one thing at a time. You want a quick idea? For those of us who are religious, say Birkat HaMazon, reading it from a Siddur, not by heart. Say it out loud. Say it b'simcha, with happiness and joy. Something so small, but nevertheless significant. Make one commitment. One commitment will be easier to fulfill than taking too much upon yourself. Another important idea is to be very careful from spoiling yourself. Don't pamper yourself with too much pinukim, with too much pleasures, because obviously if you want to have the same strength that your forefathers had for self-sacrifice, you can't pamper yourself. If you pamper yourself, you're defeating the whole purpose of being sensitive to doing teshuvah. That is one of the ideas of the tzom, of the fast. A fast is to take away that pampering. Don't eat, don't drink for an entire 25, 26 hours, Yom Kippur. So that can help you in bringing down that desire for pleasures, or bringing down that arrogance. It's intended to help you break yourself down to a point where you can reflect, hopefully, on the truth. To be very, very careful not to put up a wall or a partition. What is that? A wall of partition means that there are people out there who are not interested in listening to what you have to say. Be very careful with not wanting to listen to what others have to say, because if you don't have the attitude, I'm willing to be convinced that I'm wrong, then you're never going to listen to criticism. That's an artificial partition that people set up. I'm not willing to listen to what anybody has to say. You've closed yourself up. You've not given yourself a chance. Be very careful from putting up a partition. Always say, okay, I'm an agnostic. I'm willing to be convinced. Great. So far, so good. Be very careful not to say it. everything is right, I'm perfect. That for sure not. But even more than that, be willing to hear criticism. Don't set up this artificial wall of holding criticism back from others telling you or giving you criticism. The steps for doing Teshuvah, if we can summarize, are as follows. Besides having the willingness to do it, obviously, besides being truthful, the 5 important steps are as follows. One is adnut. One has to recognize that there is a creator to the world who has put me in this world and expects of me certain things. That's called adnut. You have to acknowledge that. If one does not have that, then why should he do teshuvah? For whom? For what? Adnut, I recognize there's a God who created me, created the world for a purpose, and he expects certain things of me. The next step was ahavat atzmo, we said, self-esteem. You have to like yourself. You have to have an interest in yourself. Number 3 was hitbonenut. You have to examine, look around, look at yourself, look at your life. Number 4, which I didn't talk about too much, but we've spoken about it in another lecture, is akarat tov labore. Be grateful and thankful to the Almighty for all the good that He has bestowed upon you, all the blessing. Look at all the good, not all the negative. Focus on all the good things that you have, that you're alive and breathing. And even if you're not so, chas v'shalom, so healthy, there's always something good that you can look at. Focus on the good, because that will allow you to be thankful. And thankfulness is very, very important, because if I'm thankful to Him, that means I owe Him something. He's given me something, He wants something in return. Very important to be grateful for everything that we have. And the next step is the steps that are necessary to break the midot hara'ot, to work on one's character. Because remember, teshuvah is not only for accepting upon ourselves to do a mitzvah or to hold ourselves back from doing an averah, sin. Teshuvah is also on midot, on character, on personality. Don't be angry, don't be lazy, don't be stingy, right? These are midot. These are not averot per se. They're not sins, but they're characteristic, they're traits that may be negative. And Teshuvah means that I'm willing to work on them. I cannot eradicate them. They're part of my nature, but I can control them. Teshuvah on midot is therefore very important. To be prepared to take the necessary steps to begin seriously working on one's character. Last but not least, I want to remind all of you that one of the greatest problems, greatest sin, and greatest mistake that people make is wasting their time. Time is such a precious commodity. It's so limited. We may only have a couple years left. One does not know how long he's going to live. Make good use of the time. Very, very important, perhaps more important than almost anything else. Besides, of course, doing the mitzvot and staying away from averot, is be careful with time. Don't waste it. Don't waste it on shtuyot, on nonsense. Use your time wisely. Because time that is lost cannot be brought back. Certain things that were done wrong, you can correct. You stole money, you can bring it back. Certain averot are possible to correct. Certain sins, of course, are easier than others to correct. Hashem, of course, will atone for them. But time? How are you going to fix that? How are you going to bring back lost time? Be very, very careful on how you manage your time. Our tradition says that whoever makes an effort to get closer to Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem will help him. As the Prophet says, Shuvo elai v'shuva alechem. Return to me and I will return to you. And that is my wish to all of you, that all of us should take the necessary steps to return to Hashem, to get closer to Him. And in this way, He will come close to us. And may we merit to have a k'tiva v'chatima tova, to be sealed in the Sefer of Tzadikim Gemurim, of righteous people, that this should be a year of Geulah, that we should all have a chatima tova, a shana tova, to all of you. Amen. Thank you.